वो आ गए एक बार मैं बैठे दाएं बाजू वाले उधर लंबा मैं okay. Okay. No, okay, it's okay. It's okay. No, I'm okay, thank you. He's saying, can we have it? Oh, you want to? I said, me. Sorry, my mind is. Yeah, you go ahead. We're going to start in 2 minutes, inshallah. Okay, Bismillah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Amma ba'd. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome everyone. MashaAllah, all faces here today. Eid Mubarak as well for those we didn't see on Eid Day. Inshallah, we'll start our class and we'll finish just a little bit early because I know the food bags, small Eid party. Good, when you have Eid party, you see all the old faces, everybody comes, so we enjoy the party. I see, more food. We like food, yeah. So we'll start off then. Inshallah, we have in front of us Surah An-Nur. Okay, we have in front of us Surah An-Nur. Nur meaning the light, and it's the 24th chapter of the Quran. Now, Surah An-Nur being the 24th chapter, we find that this is a surah that is it's a surah which is a Madani surah. Okay, it's a Madani surah. Now, that's important to understand. It's a Madani surah because all the chapters that have been coming before, they were all Makki surahs. Now, after a whole range of Makki surahs, you get a random Madani surah. So it's very important to make that distinction. Likewise, Surah An-Nur is very tightly connected to Surah Al-Ahzab, okay, which is coming after, which is another Madani surah. The scholars of Tafsir say they are sister surahs. Some of the subjects that are inside of Nur are expanded upon in Surah Al-Ahzab. So two are very closely connected. So bear that in mind. Surah An-Nur, also the name of it comes from the ayah in which Allah said, Allahu Nuru Samawati wal Ard. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He is the light of the heavens and the earth. So this is the name that's given to the surah. And many times that the names that are given to the chapter, some of them are the Prophet informed us of their names, and some of the names afterwards you find that the Mufassirun have given those names. But the name of the surah reflects the main topic, the main subject of that surah. So in this case, we've got Surah An-Nur, which is talking about the power and the authority of Allah in these cases. Now, before we go into the details, I'd like to divide up the surah so we know what we're getting. Whenever we start any new subject or new surah or topic, it's always good to give an overview and then go into the details. Because the details, you get lost. So the surah itself, it is not very long. It's only 64 ayat. 64 ayat. And as you know, that one of the major differences between the Makki surah and the Madani surahs is that the Madani surahs are building a society. So a lot of it is rules. Makki surah is about building the character, about Iman, Aqidah, and so on and so forth. So preparing them, the Makki phase is very, very important. Because without the Makki phase, you wouldn't get the Medina. That's why sometimes you find people jump to the Medina phase, but that's why their message doesn't last, because you didn't do the 13 years of the Mecca phase. That doesn't mean that we can't go straight to the Medina phase, but it's just showing us the hikmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that even with the best of people like the Sahaba, it requires training. This deen is not an easy religion. Things that will sometimes you think to yourself, why are we doing this? Why are we doing that? For example, in Surah An-Nur, we'll come across the commands of the hijab. Right? So, or khimar, as is used, the hijab is a modern word, but the khimar, the concept of khimar, this was something new, the way Islamic khimar was new to that society. So it requires some submission. So we understand from that for a woman to understand the full understanding of khimar, it requires training. Just tell somebody, put the khimar on today, without the education, it won't last. Likewise, if you look at things like alcohol, it took a long time to get that out of society. Likewise, if you look at riba, it was the last command because it was embedded in the society. So when it comes to social changes or political changes or economical changes, it can't happen overnight. Those things take time. So this is why it's important to appreciate the Madani surahs that are coming after the Makki surah. So the main topics are as follows in Surah An-Nur. From verses, if you make note or just recognize, from verses 1 to 26, find Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's rulings and some of the punishments to those rulings. We'll come to find as soon as you can see in verse number 2, الزاني الزاني فاجلدوا كل واحد منهما مئة جلدة. Straight away, in the second verse, and we will go into the details, just an overview, straight away Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He talked about zina. Straight away, with no introduction, nothing, just straight away. Showing you that this is one of the things that destroys a society. So this is something that Islam came to stop. So in the first 26 verses, we find laws dealing with the social aspect. Up until verse 1 to 11, we have the rulings of zina, and we also have the rulings of qadhf. Qadhf is when a man accuses a woman of zina, but he has no evidence. And then the third thing as well we have is al-li'an. We'll talk about al-li'an is when a man or woman, they accuse each other of zina, but they don't have the four witnesses. What do you do in that case? And we have that cases in the lifetime of the companions where they saw it and they came to the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet gave them a solution. So in the case of zina, you have to have four witnesses. Talk about here, it's mentioned in the ayah. They have to see the act. But in the case, for example, a man who came to the Prophet ﷺ and said to him that I saw my wife with another man. The Prophet asked, do you have four witnesses? How can I have four witnesses? In my house. In my house, I saw. So then there was a pause, and then Allah SWT revealed the verses of li'an. What do you do in this situation? So we'll come to look at that as well. Okay? Then from verses number 11 up until about verses 27, 28, we find the story of al-ifk. And this is one of the most powerful stories in the Quran. This is why Surah An-Nur, I'm going to intentionally go through this surah slowly. Okay, and I'm going to go through, there's a lot of discussion, a lot of things, so we're going to go through it slowly. Inshallah, we'll go through the story of the ifk as well in detail. So, and when I say detail, I'm referring to what is mentioned in the Quran and what is mentioned in the Sunnah, and that's it. That is what is meant by detail. In the story of the ifk, just a little introduction and then go into the details. The story of the ifk is where the wife of the Prophet was accused of these acts of zina. That's why the opening part of the surah, it begins with that topic. And then after laying out the rules, then Allah mentions the story. So the story happened in the lifetime of the Prophet. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us about the story of the ifk, all those involved, all those who said, and all those who made tawbah, and the hypocrites. Everything is mentioned in Quran. We don't need anything else. So it's not like it's an event that took place after Quran and Sunnah. It happened during wahy. So we don't need anybody else's commentary. We just need to see what Allah has said, the Prophet has said, and it is sufficient. We can see some of the ayat as well of what the companions of the Prophet mentioned. We'll go through in detail. So bear in mind the story, and the story of the ifk as well is very important. Not just the fact that it sets the social laws, it's a very emotional story. Really, truly understand it. It's very emotional. When the Prophet was brought, his wife was brought to tears, his father-in-law was brought to tears. Society was crumbling because of the danger of spreading rumors and gossip. So it's a very, very one of the most emotional stories inside the Quran, but a lot of lessons. So we're going to take a long time, inshallah, and cover this. So we'll have a look at that. Then verses 27 to 34 is the second part of the surah, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about further social rules, and especially about lowering the gaze and the importance of marriage. Okay, so we'll come have a look at that as well. And the dangers of promiscuity in society. Then the third section of the surah from 35 to 57, then we get a shift. And the shift then talks about Allah, about Tawheed. We get the verse of An-Nur samawati wal ard, bringing all authority and power back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's also very, very important. You'll find in the Quran, wherever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about big injunctions or big rules, right after the rules Allah gives, whether it is about fasting, whether it is about bad, whether it is anything that Allah knows is difficult for the soul to digest, Allah mentions after that the power of Allah. Because you know why you're doing it. So you know who's telling you to do it. Okay, who's giving you those instructions. So we'll come to have a look at Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the message of Tawheed in that. Then the fourth part of the surah, which is verses 58 to 63, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will tell us about social etiquette. Some of the ways in which we deal with one another. From amongst those, the most important of those is how to visit each other when we go to each other's houses. Etiquettes of visiting, especially when it comes to visiting the Prophet ﷺ. Because now you can imagine the rules of parda and hijab and khimar are coming in. So you have to have some etiquette when you go to somebody's house. In those times, and maybe it still happens in some villages now, people, they don't have doors. It was just a cloth. So, but people had respect. Even though it's a cloth, people had respect. But it was common that a brother will just walk in, or a sister will just walk in. So it was quite common then, and because there wasn't strict rules of hijab, it wasn't such a big thing. But then it started to become a thing that people are walking into the house of the Prophet and his family is there. And you'll find that which companion was it? Let's see, which companion was it who really kept asking the question about the hijab and the khimar? Then Allah revealed the verses. Omar kept saying, he said that he doesn't like it that people walk into the Prophet's house like that. He said, I don't feel comfortable like that people just walk into your house. So this is from the question. So this is one of the reasons to why when the Prophet ﷺ, he said, if there was to be a prophet after me, it would be Umar, is because many of his questions led to Quran being revealed. Really amazing. It shows us how Umar, his insight, his understanding was phenomenal. That he saw something, even like, for example, alcohol. Who was asking the questions? Umar kept asking. And every time he asked, Allah revealed a verse. The same way hijab kept asking, Allah revealed a verse. So we see that Umar's hikmah and his foresight. This is the great qualities of a leader. That leader doesn't just look at the problem of today. He looks what's happening in a year's time. And he solves it before it happens. So he realized alcohol is going to be destructive. We need something. So he kept asking. Likewise, the issue of imar and some barriers between men and women. Okay, so he revealed that. And we'll go through it as well when we get to the discussion. And in this pre-Islamic society, known scholars call this area, what do they call this? So the pre-Prophet era, they call it the era of Jahiliyyah, right? They call it, there's a reason why it's called Jahiliyyah, because the things people used to do was crazy. And to change that was a big thing. For example, when it comes to the issue of women, prior prophethood, women weren't even considered to be human. Let's put it that way. Well, they weren't even, had no importance. So when it comes to topics, especially when it comes to topics dealing with marriage and so on and so forth, there was no guidelines for marriage. So a man could have 1,000 wives if he wanted. And on top of that, he could have 1,000 mistresses if he wanted. And it was normal. Nobody would say anything. It was normal. If he had the financial power, he could do it. Likewise, there were other snippets, and then we'll mention it further. For example, one of the ways, and Aisha radiallahu ta'ala mentions this in her explanation, that one of the other ways that people used to get married was that a woman, she would sleep with multiple men. And then when she would get pregnant and give birth, then they would line up all of those men, and whichever one looks closest to the child, she would marry him. So these are the kind of ways in which they lived. So this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed verses that this has to stop. This is not the way to live. That's when in this Surah An-Nur, we find that not just women's rights were given and respected, and they were actually elevated to the same level as men. But of course, we have different roles and responsibilities. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala elevated the role of women. And this was also, it's important also to contrast this Western world, because we live in the Western world, not that they dictate our deen, but just put it into perspective. This was over 1,400 years ago. The woman was given full rights. The woman was elevated to the role of a man. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told women, gave them everything just like a man. But at the same time, if you make a contrast with that with Europe, the church was discussing whether a woman is actually even a human or not. They were burning them at the stake. They said they're witches, they're devils. They're blaming them for all the wrongdoing. And that wasn't just for a year, that was right up until the end of the Dark Ages. Even when the Muslims came to Spain, which was like 700 years, they were still having these same discussions. So if you want to talk about advancement, we were well ahead of them. What's happening in the modern world, that's a little bit, in its inception, we were well ahead. The women were well ahead. They had full access to education, they had full access to even roles in politics, they had a full role in all aspects. But there was limitations, there's no doubt. Every person has limitations. Then the fifth segment of the surah will be talking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's kingdom and his power, which is the very last verse. So hopefully gives us a good understanding or a breakdown of the surah. Right, now, the next question is, when was this surah revealed? Okay. Now, we mentioned it's Medina, but whereabouts in the Medini faith? Well, we know one thing, that this surah was revealed before the Battle of Ahzab. It means before Surah Al-Ahzab, right? So this means that the Battle of Ahzab took place in the... It happened before that. It also happened definitely before of Libya, which took place at the end of... So many of the Mufassirun, they say this took between the 50th year and the 60th is when it took place, because Ahzab happened after. So this is roughly the order in which it came. So let's begin then. So the very first, the opening part of the surah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, Suratun أنزلناها وفرضناها وأنزلنا فيها آية بينات لعلكم تذكرون. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he begins, and this is a unique way, make a note of this as well. This is the only surah in the Quran that begins with Suratun. Yeah? A surah. It's a very bold way to start a surah. There's no kind of warm introduction. Suratun, a surah anzalnaha, a surah that we have revealed, وفرضناها, and we have obligated, mandated what is inside it upon you. So the surah right from the very beginning is very strong. There's no warm-up. Straight away Allah says Suratun, pay attention, this is a big surah. And it's going to be very challenging for people because the content of the surah will disturb some of your meaning, understanding of what's happened in the past and what happened with the Prophet ﷺ, and the orders and rules in it as well, quite heavy. So Allah says Suratun, this surah anzalnaha, we sent it. So know that whatever's going to come inside this surah, it is from Allah. So pay attention and observe the rules that are about to come. وَفَرَضْنَاهَا Farada is referring to laws, and we have given inside it laws. Okay, so it is coming from Allah, and these laws are coming to us from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَأَنزَلْنَا فِيهَا, and inside of the surah we have revealed in it ayatin bayinat. Ayatin can mean signs, proofs, miracles, any of those words. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says bayinat. This is very important to start off with, because as we get into the surah, especially the issue, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says ayatin bayinat. That's very important, because in this story that we're going to come up with, we have people who are enemies of Allah and his wives and others, and they talk some of the events. And maybe you have others who will go the other side. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, what I've given you in terms of the ayat and the Prophet's explanation is bayinat. You don't need anything else. That's sufficient for you. That's where you should stop. Don't go further than that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, ayatin bayinat. I've given you, it's very, very clear. What is going to come is sufficient for you. It's clear. لَعَلَّكُمْ تَذَكَّرُونَ. And perhaps through knowing those things, تَذَكَّرُونَ, you will think and you will ponder and you will learn. Okay. So again, we notice that the surah, because it's a very big and heavy surah, and there's a lesson in it, what's the purpose of Allah telling us about these stories and about events? Is it so that me and you fight? Is it so we argue? Is it so that we say, I'm right, you're wrong? No. Allah says the whole purpose of this surah and the event of the ifk and all these other things is لَعَلَّكُمْ تَذَكَّرُونَ, you learn something. But unfortunately, we'll find that through such events, we don't learn anything. What we learn is division, divide, and fight. Hopefully, through my explanation, bismillah, that will put that to a side and we'll stick to what is ayatin bayinat. What is clear, we will adhere to. What is ambiguous, leave it. There is no need to go into that. That's why it says لَعَلَّكُمْ تَذَكَّرُونَ, so that you learn a lesson and are mindful of what is inside. Into the column. What is also important to note when we look at the ahkam and the rules that are about to follow, which are very, very powerful rules, is that as we mentioned with the Madani surahs, there's a lot of rules inside there, and the Makki surahs, they prepare us for these heavy, heavy rules. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is also teaching us here that in order for us to truly implement and execute the laws of Allah, the heart needs to be in the right place. The heart needs to be in the right place. And we can see that in places, in modern history as well, that we've seen that in certain governments or places where governments have enforced, Allah's law on people without proper training, whenever the people have had an opportunity to rebel, they rebel. Right? Wherever, for example, women have been forced to put hijab without taking into consideration everything else, then you'll find that they, in a situation like, for example, in the United States, in 1920, I think they put a law to abolish or ban alcohol. But it's not even a Muslim society. They realized alcohol is destructive. They actually made it law. Selling alcohol is all banned. When they brought the ban in, the ban didn't last 3 or 4 years until they made alcohol legal again. Why? Because the hearts weren't convinced. People started to make it, the sellers, people sell it, and it was illegal alcohol. That was damaging and killing people. It actually became far worse than The point that the reason why I make mention of that is when you bring in law, I'm talking especially when it comes to Islam, when you bring in law, there has to be education and training prior to bringing in the law. Okay? At the same time, if you have the option to bring in a law, you can't also say the hearts are not ready, so I'm not going to bring it in because the deen is ready, so you can't use. Point being is that when it comes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Sharia and His law, you have to educate. Okay, you have to show and convince the people. Because I'm speaking on the topic of hijab today, because that's what's coming in Surah An-Nur. But if you were to convince of the importance of hijab, she will never take care for the rest of her life. So if you were to force her to put it on, as soon as she's on the bus, it's off. Right? So there's a bit different. So there's no point in forcing. Likewise, the prayer, the zakat, and so on and so forth. If you can convince people, it's far more powerful. You can see that throughout history. So the point is that the focus is on the heart. If the heart is in the right place, everything will happen. And the commands, which we will expand upon later, but when the commands, for example, of the hijab came, the mothers of the believers, yet, do you think they said to the Prophet, "Oh, Rasulullah, why?" And they said, "What color? Can I wear the elastic one, or do I have to put pin in?" And then they said, "Do I have a long one or short one? Or the designer one?" Or what did they do? Grabbed any cloth they could find. They said the woman bed sheets, curtains, anything. As soon as the command came, said, "Oh, is that?" They were ready for the. Likewise, when it comes to the issue of, it's a society that used to drink. Everybody used to drink. When the hukum for alcohol came haram, find so many hadith in which the person holding the cup threw the cup. The person with barrels smashed the barrels. The person who had alcohol spat it out because they were convinced in their heart what the Prophet was saying is the truth and ready to accept. Whereas, like we said, 1920 in America, when it was banned, immediately people bootlegging and stopped selling it. So the hearts are very, very important when it. Likewise, one other thing which I can expand upon it is that these aspects that we're talking about now, which is sinner, these aspects are what are known as aspects of the Sharia. It is not the whole of Sharia. Unfortunately, the way the West has portrayed Sharia, some people think when you say Sharia, the first thing that comes into mind is stoning to death, cutting the hand, and killing. That's not the whole. Sharia is the whole of Islam. So looking after your parents is Sharia. Looking after your neighbor is Sharia. Okay, this is one aspect of Sharia, which is known as the criminal law. Just like in this society, you have criminal law, then you have other aspects, other types of law as well. So we shouldn't let people think that this, when you say Sharia, it's all talking about cutting hands and stoning people. This is just one aspect. When it comes to the Sharia as well, that in order to see the real fruits of the Sharia, Sharia has to be implemented to the best of your ability in its entirety. This is important because what the Western world or the others will do, they will just pick one aspect and say, look how brutal Islam is. But you have to look at Islam as a whole system. Then you will understand the beauty of everything. All fits in together. That's what's important. When you look at this, one piece of the jigsaw puzzle. And we only appreciate the jigsaw puzzle if it's put together. We only appreciate the jigsaw puzzle if it is put together. And likewise, the rules as well of Sharia have to be applied upon all people. Not just the poor, not just the weak, but upon all people. As we lady from the Banu Makhzumiyya, I mentioned this on Friday. The lady from the Banu Makhzumiyya, she was from the elite, wealthy woman, the influential family, stole something, she got caught. And she knows that the punishment that the Prophet is going to do if you get caught, what? If you fulfill the conditions. She knew that was going to happen. So she was trying to find a way in the way. What can I do? Who can go speak to the Prophet so that my hand is not? They advised her to go speak to him. So she called him and she said, look, you're very close to the Prophet. So you go speak to him. Went to the Prophet. He went to the Prophet and he said, Ya Rasulullah, this woman, she's from the rich, wealthy, so on and so forth. So can you let her off? The Prophet, he remained silent. And he stood up and he went onto the mimbar. In the mimbar, he gave a khutbah. In the khutbah, he said, the nations before you were destroyed. And the reason to why they were destroyed is because the rules of Allah were overlooked for the rich and they were implemented only on the poor. And he said, Wallahi, I swear by Allah, that Fatima bint Muhammad, if she stole, I will cut off her hand. That is true justice. That is true Sharia. It is rules of the Sharia have to apply to the king, as well as the queen, to the president, as well as the children of the military generals, as well as the police people. The rule has to be enforced for all people. That's when you would appreciate Sharia. So when the West talks about Muslim countries, say, look at your Sharia. That's not Sharia. Okay, so what you're seeing certain things and others do and they call it Sharia, maybe they're implementing aspects of the Sharia. As a whole, it's not. Because they get away with murder, literally, and the poor, they held a almost fake. As a whole. All right, so we got that. Now, when we come to the very first verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, الزانية والزاني فاجلدوا كل واحد منهما 100 جلدة ولا تأخذكم بهما رأفة في دين الله إن كنتم تؤمنون بالله واليوم الآخر وليشهد عذابهما طائفة من المؤمنين. Okay, this verse needs to be said. الزانية والزاني, the female or the adulteress, the adulterer, both of them, فاجلدوا, جلد means to lash. Yeah, lash كل واحد, both of them, منهما 100 جلدة, 100 lashes. Lash them 100 lashes. Now, first thing, this ayah is referring to, when it comes to the punishment of sinner, there's two types. But you want to make a note of this. There's what's known as the punishment for muhsin, and there's the punishment for ghayr muhsin. So if a person commits zina and they were never married before, this is the rules that apply. Okay, so somebody who was never married but committed zina, they are to be lashed, male and female, to be lashed. But if a person was married, committed zina as married, then the hukum is different. Okay, we'll come to that. So just bear that in mind. It's not the ruling for the married man, or not just married man, but married man and woman. Even if they had a divorce, now they're single, they're still considered to be, they'll still be considered as a married person because they experienced that life. But the person who was never married and then committed zina, then it's 100 lashes. So this verse, for you, highlight that point because we will go into all of that. Also, what's interesting, the word fajlidu, which means to flog, what does the word actually jild actually mean? The word fajlidu means lash, which also some of the scholars said is an important benefit to know out of it. The lashing pain of it shouldn't be deep than in level. It means don't start hitting them with nails, poking them, start putting knives in them. No, it's a lash. The pain should be just felt on the skin. Okay, so some skin, don't go overboard, start hitting them more. It's just 100 lashes. And in those lashes, yes, you will feel some pain. But in reality, 100 lashes super painful. Not super painful. 100 lashes. But 100 lashes at skin level, right? There is some pain there, but it is not torture. The purpose of the fajlidu mi'ata jalda is not to torture the zani or the zaniya. It is more of a what? More of a deterrent. It's more of a deterrent and humiliation. So, and we'll come to see as well, Allah says, again, He says, shahada means to witness. So this lashing takes place in public. Okay? So the purpose of the lashing is not to torture them. Right? They will feel pain. I agree with them, they will feel pain. But it's not to the point where it's, okay, it's not more of a deterrent, and it's more of a public shame and embarrassment so that others will think, I don't want to be in that situation. Whereas the person who was married, stoning to death. That's also done in public. فَجْلِدُوا كُلَّ وَاحِدٍ مِّنْهُمْ مِائَةَ جَلْدَةٍ. So both of them is 100 lashes. The issue of the 100 lashes is also unique to the Sharia. The issue of stoning to death is not unique to the Sharia. Bear this in mind as well. For those people who attack Islam and say, look, you're violent and aggressive, stoning the adulterer or the adulteress is violent and aggressive, actually, no. That law was a continuation of Mosaic law. Musa alayhi salam said that. Isa alayhi salam said that. Muhammad continued that. So before you try to tell us that we're aggressive and violent, you need to in your own books. Just because you don't implement your book, don't mean it's not in. So that's a very important point to note, that it is not unique to Muslims. From Musa alayhi salam, as we know as well in Surah Al-Baqarah, that those people, when they worship the calf, Musa alayhi salam, what did he say? Kill yourselves. Kill yourself. Allah said you have to kill yourself as an atonement for your sin. But then that rule was overturned. But the point being was that the people who worship the golden calf, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned to them their punishment was to kill themselves. It's coming from them. Okay, good. There's another, on that point as well, there's another Mosaic law that continued from Musa to Isa to Muhammad as well. Does anybody know what the other one is? Did we mention that? Any other than that? Quite a difficult question. There's another law that wasn't unique to Islam. We'll make it out to unique. From Musa. Bad. Very good. Apostasy. Yeah. The apostasy law is not unique to Muslims. In the Old Testament, these are important things to note. Because being aggressive, violent, and blah, blah, blah. Okay. These two are from Mosaic law that have carried through stoning and also the so continue on. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that لا تأخذكم بهما رأفة. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and that when you're doing these 100 lashes, لا تأخذكم بهما رأفة. Ra'fa means to have pity or to have mercy. That when you're going to do the 100 lashes, don't show them ra'fa, which is mercy. That at that moment in time, if they start pleading or begging, and so forth, no. There's a simple rule in here. The laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is a very important point. The laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if an issue has been raised to the qadi, then the law has to be applied. Don't show softness now. The Prophet ﷺ himself mentioned that if you have disputes or problems, or even if it's major sins, if you can resolve it amongst yourselves, don't come to it. Because the consequence of coming to the Prophet is going to be no mercy. Because if that's the case, then the law will become a joke. Then if a case goes to the Prophet, the Prophet will pass a judgment. Okay, the law judgment will be passed. So the Prophet in many cases say that you can resolve the issue amongst yourselves, deal with it. And we know the many cases, not many cases, but a few cases in which where the woman who had committed zina came to the Prophet and she said, Ya Rasulullah, I have done this and that. What did the Prophet do? He looked the other way. He said, he looked the other way. He said to her, go away. You carry on talking, there's a big problem here. He came from the other side. And she said, Ya Rasulullah, you've seen me, I've done something really bad. Prophet again looked the other way. Then she came from the other side. Third time she said it, now the Prophet knows. The point. If you're able to deal with the internal problems internally, that's great. That's what the Prophet solve it. So, for example, if theft took place with others, or you go to the court, sort it out amongst yourself. Otherwise, one of your hands are going to get chopped off. Think before you do something. In that case, the lady who did that, then the Prophet said to her, are you pregnant? She said, I am. The Prophet gave her another child. He said, go and give birth. Basically, what he's saying to her is, put yourself up, make tawbah, and put your life up. When she gave birth, she came back to the Prophet. Birth now give me the punishment. And he said, yeah, 2 years. So look at the mercy of the Prophet. He said, 2 years. So you're free. So again, he's telling her, don't come back to me. You're free. Breastfed the child, 2 years have gone by. She comes back to the Prophet. She says, Ya Rasulullah, I did something bad and I need to be pure. I need to be purified. The Prophet then said, no choice. He said, everybody, take her and stone her. It was only then it was put into the hole, and even upon the stoning, it makes mention that even upon the stoning, when they were stoning her, that one of the companions, as they're stoning her, the blood landed on some of their clothes. And they made a comment. They said, look at the blood of a Thani. They made a comment. Right. Wallahi, the tawbah of this woman is greater than anything anyone's done. Because for a woman to come back and ask to be stoned, not once, not twice, not thrice, but 6 times, shows her iman. It also shows human weakness to make mistakes. Prophet testified to say that her tawbah was accepted, even though she was a zani. So showing us here that the point is that the ayah, when it says لا تأخذ بهما رأفة في دين الله, that if the case comes, and so when it comes to the Prophet, the Prophet can't now, he has to implement Allah's law. The same thing in our countries, Muslim world, if you have Islamic courts, that is, not these kangaroo courts in our countries, but if you have Islamic courts, if an Islamic issue or an issue is brought to the Islamic court, they have to implement. Can't let them. So that's why it's advised many times, fix your own problems before you go to court, because if you go to court, the law has to. So this is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا تَأْخُذْهُمَا بِهِ رَأْفَةً, that once they've entered into the court system, don't show them mercy now. Now implement the law. Okay? Otherwise your deen will become a joke. Keep forgiving people if it's your uncle or auntie or friend. Once the case comes to court, the job. So this is where the meaning of ra'fatun, and likewise, the word deen has many, many meanings. Important to note here that most of the time when deen, how is deen translated? Way of life or religion, right? But one of the meanings of the word deen, which people overlook, is the laws of Allah. Here it means law. So don't show mercy in the laws of Allah. Because if you said in the religion, it doesn't make sense. Right? If you said don't show mercy in the religion, it doesn't make sense. But in the word deen here, and this is why in the Western world, when we use the word deen, people say religion. And it waters it down. Because it's not just a spiritual thing. You go masjid or you pray and that's deen. Deen, the word deen is more deeper than that. The word deen has law inside, economics inside, it has politics inside. Every deen means the system of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So here, deen Allah, don't show them mercy in the system or the laws that Allah has prescribed. Okay. That was in the story of Yusuf alayhi salam, when they caught Binyamin stealing. You know the story, he didn't steal, but they were saying, how should we judge him? Because these guys were Palestinian and these guys were Egyptian. They have their own law, they have their own law. And they are asking, how should we judge punishment? They said, Deen al Malik. Judge him according to the deen of the Malik. No, not laws. Implement that law. And he wasn't killed, but he was working for the government, whatever the country. The word deen, I'm just the word deen, when you translate it into religion, it's a very weak. So bear that in mind. Okay. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, In kuntum tu'minuna billahi wal yawmil akhir. And you will only do this, Allah says, if you truly believe in Allah and the last day. Okay. Notice that as well, you can highlight that point, that in kuntum tu'minuna billahi wal yawmil akhir, that this comes in when you've got a very heavy punishment. Because Allah is saying that in order to execute punishment, you have to be a true believer in Allah and His Messenger. So now, God forbid, but imagine if that's your relative or a friend and so on and so forth, you have to execute punishment, trying to find 101 ways to protect your tribesmen. Allah says, if you're a believer in Allah and you're a believer in the last day, do what I tell you. Don't show them mercy. Imagine that as well. It's your own tribesmen. You're the one in court. Allah saying, don't show your brother or your cousin or whatever mercy. Try the law. And you would only do that, Allah says, in kuntum tu'minuna billahi, and this is a reflection of your true iman. وَلْيَشْهَدْ عَذَابَهُمَا. And Allah, He says, and let a group of people from amongst you witness their punishment. So the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are to be witnessed. Reason to why they're to be witnessed. All the laws of Allah, you'll find there are deterrents. They're not there to punish or torture people, but simply as deterrents. When it comes to the laws of Allah, make a note of this. From a criminal law perspective, that there are 3 types of laws There is first the law, what's known as al-hudud. These are known as the hadd. Allah mentions that in the Quran. Tilka hudud. These are the laws of Allah. And the hudud of Allah, hadd means the limits. These are the limits of Allah. There's actually only a few of them, about 7 or 8 of them. Everything else is not in the hadd. The hadd, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned the crime, and Allah gives the punishment for that crime, and you have no choice but to apply that. Anybody who, and we find this in modern day thinkers and so on and so forth, who try to, I know the punishments are harsh, that there's people who try to change the laws of Allah. And the hudud, you cannot change them. When you change the hudud, I change the law, and that is, if it's done intentionally, that's tantamount to. So, for example, here, it says here, give them 100 lashes. If you say that's a bit too much, you'll just give them a warning instead. What you're saying is your law is superior to Allah, which means you're doing shirk with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in His tahkim. You're not allowed to do that. Whatever Allah has said, that's what you have to apply. So some people may say it's the modern society, Western society, Eastern, that doesn't matter. The concern is that's what Allah said. So when it comes to the laws of Allah, then bear in mind that there are 3 types of laws. One of the hudud. The hudud are those things that are mentioned. The crime is mentioned, and also the punishment is mentioned. For example, here's a few. One is zina. Right? And there are 2 types of zina, as we mentioned. Somebody who was never married before, if they get caught doing zina, what's their punishment? 100 lashes. Somebody's married and gets caught doing zina, punishment is. And we will prove all of these, so making claims. But so that's the first thing. The second one is hadd al-qadhf. Qadhf is when a man or woman accuses somebody of indecency that hasn't got evidence. In this case, what do we do with this person, male or female? 80 lashes. Yeah, so make a note of that. That's 80 lashes publicly. This shows us again something really beautiful. That from amongst the maqasid of the Sharia and goals of what is trying to attain, one of those things is called one's dignity and honor. You can't go around calling somebody a zani. You can't go around, if somebody was to go around calling a woman a zania, you ruin her reputation. Nobody wants to talk to her, nobody wants to marry her, and she's innocent. So you can't go around talking about. That's really important in today's society. Today, with the trend of social media and everything, that everyone just makes fun about your mum, dad. They're just making fun of mums of this, your dads of that. We accept, no problem. There are some limits. You can't just make jokes and accuse your wife of this. Now, oh, it's jokes. Just not bad. Against Islam. So when it comes to people's honor, dignity, and this is part of the Sharia. So anybody who accuses another woman or a man of indecency and they can't bring 4 witnesses, which is coming in the next ayah, 80 lashes. Okay. Then the next one, the hadd is haddul khamr. What is the punishment for somebody who gets caught drinking alcohol? And you don't have proof. Yeah. And you don't have 4 witnesses. If you have 4 witnesses, then it will go to zina. But if, for example, somebody accuses somebody of zina and doesn't have the 4 witnesses and doesn't do what we're going to talk about in a few moments, this person will be lashed. Accuser will be lashed. And why? To stop people accusing. You can't go around talking about people like that. Okay, so that is qadhf. Okay, I'll come to that. That's a good question. Now, the next hadd, bear in mind. This one. Okay. So the next one is the hadd of khamr, drinking alcohol. If you get caught drinking alcohol, again, it's if you get caught drinking alcohol. It's not if you drink. So if some Muslim, for example, drank at home, nobody found out, that's not the case. I'm not encouraging you to go home and drink. Okay, so don't say, Morana said you can drink at home, but you can't drink in public. I'm not saying that. We're talking about law here. Okay, so law is different. We're not doing a counseling session. Okay, it's law. So in law, if a person was drinking at home, there will be no punishment for that. But if somebody was caught drinking public, what's the difference between public and private? When you commit a sin publicly, you are promoting it. You're inviting others to do it. You're encouraging others to do it. That's not allowed. We're all human beings. We've all got mistakes. There's nobody here that's perfect. But if the sin that you're committing in private because you've got some weaknesses, that's different. We're human beings. But then if you go out and start doing it publicly, now number one, you're showing disrespect to Allah. You don't care. And number two, you give other people the motivation and courage to do it yourself. So this is why the one who gets caught drinking in public is the one who's punished. And it's very interesting that on one occasion, the Khilafah of Umar, one of the things he used to do, which was really beautiful, that he used to, in the evenings, he used to cover himself up and he used to walk amongst the people. And people didn't know who he was. And he did that because he said, I want to know what my people are going through. Allah's going to ask me, so I need to know which mother is feeding her children and she's struggling, which man is struggling. And he would go out, and there's so many stories, I don't want to, but there's so many beautiful stories. And on one occasion, as they were doing that, one of the companions said to him, Omar, he said, behind this door, there's somebody drinking. What do you think Omar did?
No. He jumped.
No, he hit him. On one occasion, he hit him. He said, why did you tell me that? I don't need to know. That's between him and Allah. Allah will deal with him. Why did you tell me? If you tell me, now I have to do something about it. Why you tell me? So leave it. So he actually hit him, telling him to be quiet. There's that story as well about him jumping over the wall. Okay. So, khamr. How many lashes is it for khamr? It was 40. Umar increased it to 80. Okay. Again, somebody will ask, how can Umar increase it to 80? We'll talk about that when the time comes. Okay. He increased to 80. The next one is the hadd al-sariqa. Theft. And theft, again, we need to discuss this because there are rules behind it. Not every theft means your hand's going to get cut off. There's a specific type of theft that if somebody commits, then their hand is to be cut off. And that's another hadd. What else do we have? And then hadd al-ridda, apostasy. We talked about that. And the final one is fi hadd al-haraba, which is highway robbery. Okay, that's also mentioned that's death as well. Okay, so those are, how many did I mention? 7 or 8? 8, I think I mentioned. These are the only laws that are mentioned in the Quran. Allah mentions the law and mentions the specific punishment to it, and you've got no choice but to apply it. Only 8. I mean, if you think about how many crimes a human can commit, there's so many. But only these 8 Allah stipulates. So when people say, oh, Islam, look at your laws, are so stringent. No, these are the only 8 Allah has mentioned. All other ones don't fall into hadd. That's the first category. The second category of laws is what's known as qisas. What is qisas? Qisas is dealing with human life. If somebody killed someone, what's the punishment there? Yeah, life for a life. If you want to, which I'll explain in a minute. So when it comes to killing somebody, that's known as qisas. And also if you harm somebody, for example, somebody breaks your arm. Now, what's the punishment for that? You can either claim compensation, or you can break their arm. Yeah. Again, somebody may think, wow, that's really brutal. But if you know your arm's going to get broken by breaking the other person's arm, will you break that person's arm? No. If you know you have to pay £10 fine if you break somebody's arm, would you consider breaking his arm? It's human nature. You will. But if you know that if I break his arm, my arm's going to get broken, you will think twice. You think maybe tomorrow, not today. You will think about. Allah knows human nature. So that's why we find Allah's laws are like that. And at the same time, Allah also offers that you can also pardon the person as well. So in summary, when it comes to qisas, all of these things are lengthy discussions, but I just want you to get a good overview. When it comes to qisas, a person killing another person, if it's proven, all of these things have to go through court. There's no kangaroo courts. Everything has to go through court, and lawyers, solicitors, jury, everything has to go through court. If it's proven through court that A killed B, right? Now, A is the killer. Now, B, the person's passed away, the family of B is sitting there in court. This is what's unique with the Islamic system compared to the Western system. In the Western system, if it's proven that A killed B, the law of the land will apply the law onto A. So whatever it is, life in prison or 10 years in prison, whatever, they will apply. The family of the deceased have no say. They're just sitting and watching. Whereas in Islam, when the duty of the judge is simply to prove the case. Once it's proven that A is the killer, then the judge has no authority to do anything. Now he passes the authority and power to the family. And the family have 3 choices. They can either do life for life, or they can take money, they will negotiate, give us this money. Or number three is forgive him altogether, let him go. And that's why I mentioned in the Quran, the best of those three is to let him go. But at the same time, you're not obliged. If you want life for life, Allah says is your haqq. Because he took your son, your daughter, your friend, your relative, is your haqq. But the beauty of the Islamic system is who is empowered in this situation? The family. And what will that do to the family? It'll give them rest. The heart will be rest because they chose. For life now, they'll be okay. But in the Western system where it happens, God forbid, billah, but that person will come out. And that father or that brother or the husband will have to see that person's face, which is going to destroy him. So therefore, Islamic system empowers the family. And this is why this is qisas and not hudud. Because hudud, Allah said, do it, you have to do it. Qisas, Allah gives you the power, you choose what you want to do. And that's true empowerment. That's what Allah He gives. So that's the first one is had. The first one is had, the second one is qisas, the third one is ta'zir. Ta'zir basically means the people choose. You make up the laws of your land. So, for example, if somebody is caught speeding, right, what's the punishment for getting caught speeding?
Fine and stuff.
Fine and stabbed. Yeah. Did Allah say that in the Quran? Did the Prophet say that in the Sunnah? Who decided that?
People.
People decided. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, apart from qisas and apart from hudud, all other laws, you decide. How beautiful is that? When people say, oh, religion, you got no choice. No. Allah said, in these matters, you got no choice. Because I know, if I leave it to you, you will cause fasad. I have to take control of 5 or 6 matters, these are mine. Everything else, you choose as a people. You choose the laws. Somebody transgresses the red light, or somebody, parks in the wrong place, you choose the laws. It's up to you. And whatever you decide, apply it. So those are the three. Those are the three aspects of the criminal law. One other important point to make mention of when we look at these things is that law cannot be implemented without what? Without power. Without power. And that is the whole point. That these laws are very important. If you want people to stop committing zina, if you just give a lecture in the masjid, I'm just giving an example, in the masjid or wherever, you told them about the dangers of zina, don't do zina, blah, blah, blah. Let's say out of the audience, 15-20% of them were convinced. They said no. Do you think everybody is going to listen to you? Even with the best khutbah in the world, do you think people are going to listen to you? There will be still people that will transgress. That's why law, in order for it to be implemented, requires education and convincing, and at the same time requires a sword. And you're thinking, oh my God, he said sword. Go to the Old Bailey, and you can Google it when you finish. Go to the Old Bailey and look at the statue that's on top of the Old Bailey. It's a woman, blindfolded, holding a scale in one hand, and what's in the other hand? What? I didn't make that up. You can check it. Anybody watching live doesn't like me, I didn't make that up. It's on the Old Bailey. They're showing you that law, in order for law to be implemented, yes, we need education and convincing, but there's going to be people that are going to transgress. And in order to make sure those transgressors are in line, we've got something to sort you out. So that's the important point of these laws, because some people say, like, they're a bit harsh, but these are the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And bear in mind as well that the harshness of a law shows us the extremity of the crime. If Allah has given something a very harsh punishment, that means that the crime itself is very severe, so don't do it. It's destructive to yourself and also destructive to the society. Time is nearly party time. So fast. Okay. Okay, so let's finish this ayah and then we'll stop there. So the topic of zina, we mentioned 2 things, that this is for the one that is not married. For the one that is married, somebody can say, where is your proof for what you're saying? We find that Umar bin Khattab, he narrates an ayah, الشيخ وشيخته إذا زنت فارجموهما البتة نكال من الله والله عزيز حكيم. This ayah, you will not find it inside the Quran. Okay, you will not find this ayah inside the Quran. So now people are thinking, what's going on here? This is an example of naskh, abrogation. Now, this was a verse inside the Quran. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered the verse to be removed from the Quran. This is known as naskh. So the ayah itself was removed. And the ayah, it says, "Ash-shaykh wa shaykhatu idha zana." If a man or woman commit zina, then give them rajm. This was a verse of the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala removed this verse from the Quran, but the hukm, the ruling still stands. And this is what's known as a naskh, abrogation. And it's mentioned inside Surah Al-Baqarah, the concept of naskh. This is one of those examples. That's why some people you'll find, modernists or apologetics or ill-informed Muslims, they will say that this ruling is not from Islam, it's not found in the Quran. Which is, no, it was inside the Quran, but it was removed. And what's the proof of that? Is that number one, the Prophet said so, and number two, Umar narrates. He says that if it wasn't for the fear of Allah and the Prophet, I would have continued preaching this ayah, but the Prophet said it has been removed. And the other proof of that as well is the fact that if somebody did commit zina in the lifetime of the Prophet, he implemented the rajm. If the Prophet implemented it, he's not just doing it like that, it's an instruction from Allah. And what's also very interesting as well is that Omar, he says that he fears that there will come a time that people will stop doing the rajm. And the reason to why they will stop doing the rajm is, they say, because we didn't find it inside the Quran. And what he's alluding to here is that people will give their attention to the Quran and they will not look at the Sunnah of the Prophet. Because in order to understand Islam, you've got to look at the Quran, and the explanation of the Quran is found in the Sunnah. He said, towards the end of time, you'll find people very, easy with Islam. Is it in the Quran? No, okay, no, it's okay, don't worry. They're like very little importance given to the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So just to wrap up this topic, that when it comes to zina, in order for it to be proven, you have to have 4 witnesses. Okay, you have to have 4 witnesses. And these witnesses, there are some conditions. And yakuna ashhudu arba'a, there have to be 4 witnesses. If it's less than 4, then it won't count. What will happen if it's less than 4? Let's say a man accused a woman of zina, and he brought forward 3 witnesses, not 4.
Void.
He will be transferred to not. He'll be accused of slandering that woman. Why again? Because if you don't have 4 witnesses, don't bother coming. Because the punishment is to be stoned to death. You better have 4 witnesses. If you don't, so 3 people witnessed it, not enough. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, don't even bring it to court. It's not even going to get valid. If you do, you're going to get lashed. Which shows us that Allah doesn't want to stone anyone. It's just a deterrent. Yeah, it's just a deterrent. Allah doesn't want to stone him, but it's just a deterrent. And not just that, but the look at this. The witnesses have to be 4. The witnesses have to be Muslim. The witnesses have to be men, and the witnesses also have to be udul, just. And on top of that, the Prophet ﷺ, he said, these are the words of the Prophet ﷺ, is descriptive, but the Prophet ﷺ said that the witness of zina have to be such that they saw the ink leave the pen and enter the paper. Now, my question to you is, how is that even possible? When are you going to ever find a situation where you can fill all those criteria? Never. Never you're going to find it. So does Allah want to stone people to death? No. Allah is making the punishment is very scary, and the road to that punishment is borderline impossible. And that's why you find that there's 2 ways that a person could be punished for zina. Number 1 is if they're proven through the court, which I haven't found. I mean, throughout history, we haven't found that. That hasn't happened. Or the second option is confession. If a person comes themselves, like the lady did, the Sahabiya, if it comes themselves and admits it, that's as good as being found guilty. And there are 4 cases, I think, in the time of the Prophet, only 4 cases, and all 4 of them were when the people came to the Prophet and admitted it. Now, does that mean there was no other case? Of course there was. But were they proven? No, you can't. Because to find 4 male witnesses that are just and saw the ink leave the pen enter this is impossible. So the purpose is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is making the process very difficult because it doesn't want to stone anyone. But the point is that the punishment is so scary that it stops you from doing it. So if I'm speaking in general, if there was weaknesses on the side of men and women, it'd be the issue of zina, of men and women. Allah knows that this is one thing which is difficult for people to control. So in order, because it's difficult to control and the thoughts may come into your head and you may get put into vulnerable situations, Allah made the punishment so scary that even a man who will be thinking about doing it, he will think to himself, is it worth it? I can have a day of fun and I'm going to get stoned to death. It's okay. Yeah, I'm okay. Yeah, I'll pass on this one. Even though maybe he's in such a situation, he's very vulnerable and he wants to, and everything is prepared and ready for it. But the thought of just being stoned to death is so scary. It's the deterrent that at that moment in time, he will turn away from her and walk away. If there was anything lighter than that, he might think, okay, you know what, 5 years in prison, sorry, I'll take the chance. Yeah, I'll take the risk. Yeah, but when it's stoned, no way, he's not worth it. No way. Likewise, he will think the same. No matter how handsome he is or how powerful he is or whatever he's got, stoned to death, no way. See you later. It's not worth it. So Allah knows the nature of man and the nature of woman, and that's the only deterrent that will stop you from doing that, and that's why it's mentioned. And the process to it is borderline impossible. Yeah? And in the society that we live in now, adultery is not even a crime. It's not even a crime. So it's your freedom to do what you want. And we've seen some of the most elite, and I say elite in terms of power, but some of the people who sit in the highest positions of power, guilty of the most heinous adulterous crimes. And they still can't have office. They say, this is private life, leave him alone. But as a man of, as Minister of Finance or the Prime Minister or President, that's different. He's a good Prime Minister or he's a good minister, let him do his job. But his private life, let him do what he wants. But in Islam, we don't have. You have to fulfill both boxes. So that is the topic of zina. And there's two ways to prove that. Number one is through the court with the 4 witnesses as mentioned. And the second is through iqrar, which is through admission. Right? And as I mentioned, in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, there was nobody that was caught doing zina through legal process, but only through admission. And that was 4 people. And even after that, it was very, very seldom do we find that this crime actually, the punishment of it actually even applied. Okay. All right. Final thing, inshallah, then we stop when we return to the food, is a few points. What is the danger of zina? Apart from the immoral aspect of it, why is Islam so against it? What could be the dangers of it?
It was widespread.
Okay, widespread, but what's the problem of that? Okay, good. So number one is the families, yeah? Family structure will break down. Anything else?
No recognition. No.
That's a very important point. Is that then they were children who don't know their fathers.
Rootless truth.
Rootless. I didn't understand.
Rootless truth.
Ruthless.
Rootless. No roots.
Oh, no roots. Oh, yeah. So people won't know their lineages. And the problem with not knowing the lineages, there's another thing, that the haqq of inheritance will be gone. Because who takes inheritance? Okay, you don't know who the father is, so there's a problem. And then that child, if you don't know who the father is, who's going to bring that child up? Who's going to maintain that child? And then on top of that, if you've got children of zina, how do you know that in the future that 2 people want to get married? How do you know they're not brothers and sisters?
Yeah.
So the issue of zina is to preserve lineage. And I mentioned before that there are 5 main goals of the Sharia. One of those I mentioned before was to preserve what? Honor. Right? Another one of those is to protect the nasab, the lineage. And the lineage is important because number one, of inheritance. Because through the lineage we know where the inheritance goes. So without that, so if there's a child, we don't know who the dad is, no inheritance. And the father, if he's, for example, a'udhu billah, and this is common as well in society now, where if a woman has committed sin and she's got a child and she's with a man, the man thinks it's his child and it's not even his child. And then he gives his inheritance to that child, it's not even his child. He's raised it and she never told him. So these kind of crimes Islam comes to prevent. And at the same time, that if a person is in that situation, this obviously applies to the men, And if they are in that situation, they feel that they're vulnerable and they're going to commit this crime, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you so many options. And from amongst those is the concept of you can marry twice or thrice or four times. Now, again, I'm not saying that's what you should do. I'm not saying that's what you have to do. I'm just saying that in order to prevent this crime, there is an option. If you're a person who thinks you're going to fall into this, it's better you go that way. Even if you think, and women don't attack me afterwards, okay? But even if you think that my wife is going to get angry and she's going to shout at me and she's going to do all this, it's better your wife is angry than Allah is angry. If you're in that vulnerable situation, it's better that your wife is angry than Allah is angry, because you could potentially be in a very dangerous place in the hereafter. But we'll stop there. And subhanAllah, I was hoping we get to verse number 11, but we got to verse number 2.
No, no.
The topic, this, so I said Surah An-Nur is very, very detailed. And I don't want to just go over it quickly. I want to go in some detail. And from verse number 11 onwards is where the story of the ifk will come in. So hopefully maybe next week we'll start that as well. But any questions? It's still displaying the food, so I'm not delaying your food. They were late bringing the food. Yeah.
What is the Mosaic law?
Mosaic law was the laws that were given to Musa alayhi salam.
Does rape have a punishment similar to fornication or adultery?
So the question is about, what about the punishment for rape? Now, there's a lengthy discussion in the topic of rape, but one of the answers to that is it will be applied in the same situation. So if the man who committed the act of rape was not married, he'd get 100 lashes. But if the man who committed the act of rape was married, he'd be stoned to death. Yeah, there will still be proof here. There will still be a case, but I'm not sure the exact details of how that would apply. But there'll still be a due process. The rape would have to be proven.
Has to be a limit.
So the qasas, if somebody has killed someone, you don't want to take their life, but you want, are you going to make a monetary agreement? What are the limits there? Allah mentions that in the Quran. Allah says that the both parties agree on something, and Allah also mentioned in the Quran, both parties don't exaggerate. Don't go too high and don't go too low, but make something sensible.
Also, mention
I'm not sure.
in some Arab countries there is a limit. They have around 30,000.
So they must be based on some kind of standard. But in general, there is no strict limit on the compensation. It's something that the two agree with one another. Mutual agreement.
Today's time, there are no poor witnesses, but there is evidence of photo-based or videography, which also leads to other crime in the, that is cybercrime. Then how do you, like, does this compensate for poor witnesses?
Yeah, so this is a very interesting question which people are discussing today. I don't have the full answer, but what do we do with modern ways of proving a crime? So CCTV or DNA and all these kind of things. What do we do? So these things can be used. Right? These things can be used. But can they go beyond the four witnesses? This is a discussion. Why? Because the hikmah of the four witnesses is that the witness sees something. But with modern day technology, with all that's available, there is still room for error.
Not only error,
You can manipulate it as well. Even, for example, now with AI and so on and so forth, you can make it look like somebody has done something and it's very real. So even with those things, yes, they can be used as evidence, definitely be used as supporting evidence, but can they be sufficient enough to bring about the had? This is a question which people are still looking into. Because does it lead to certainty? Whereas four witnesses is definite, is certainty.
Also contradicts the principle of not spying. If it is not a public matter, it also leads to cybercrime, which is contemporary law. It is prohibited or worthy of laptop.
Yeah.
That is also
Yeah. So with regards to cybercrime, I'm not too sure, but there is an interesting point that you raised there, is that when it comes to the issue of zina or other things, it is not the duty of any Muslim to investigate another Muslim. That's not allowed. Just because you think somebody's committing zina, don't investigate. Leave it alone. No, it's, well, between husband and wife, that could be, if you want to get yourself a private investigator, that's up to you. But I'm saying in general, like for example, if your neighbor, some random guy keeps coming at random times, so let me go and investigate, and you start doing a full investigation, you got no right to do that. You can't look into people's keyholes, you can't try to look into things. Husband and wife, that's a little bit different. But you can't start investigating and start looking into people's affairs, that's not allowed. Okay, that's not allowed, you're not allowed to do that. And the other question that you raised early on, I just remembered, all of the laws of Allah, from the hudud to the qisas to the ta'zir, they can only be implemented by the state. You can't do it. You can't go to the masjid and say the Imam said, come to the back, we're going to give you 100 lashes. Imam Sahib doesn't have that authority. Okay, you can't do that. Okay, or dad says, you were drinking last night, come here, 80 lashes in the garden. You can't do that. So if people did that, the world would be a disaster. Because number one, what you think is zina might not be zina. You might not even understand the Sharia. So it has to come from the state. And only the state can execute these laws. Until we don't have that state, we can do nothing except for advise each other to not commit the sins. And that's why it's also so important, and this is also underlying message, so important that we have to establish an Islamic governance. Because other than that, your deen is null and void. There's no practicality to it. It's just nice reminders. Allah didn't give you this as a nice reminder. This is not just, oh, mashallah, so nice. No, it's a threat. It's a warning that in your society, you have to stop it. So as a Muslim, it's our duty to make sure that these laws of Allah are implemented. That's the hardest task, because when you do that, then you get labeled as a terrorist, extremist, fanatic, and all the rest of it. Yeah. So abrogation can take three forms. Okay, the abrogation could be something that has been, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned something, or in the Sunnah as well, something that's mentioned and the recitation of it has been removed and the rule also has been removed. Okay, or the abrogation can be such that the verse or the hadith remains but the rule doesn't apply. One of the examples of that is if a woman, husband died, in the early part of Islam, her iddah was 1 year. 1 year. She has to stay in that man's house for 1 year. Then Allah later changed that and He brought it to 4 months and 10 days. So, but the ayah is still there, but the implication of it is not there. We don't apply that, right? So this is abrogation. The verse stays, but the ruling it goes. And the third form is where the verse goes and the hukum remains. Where the example of that is ar-rajm. And the proof of that is the hadith of Prophet ﷺ, the statement of Umar al-Khattab, and also the actions of the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba. Abu Bakr did it, Umar did it, Uthman did it, Ali did it. It's a proof that it is not something that somebody made up, it is divine. Any other questions?
The question is regarding Tazir law, a man-made law.
Yeah.
When they make law, it sometimes affects the law-abiding citizen. Nowadays, wherever I go, I see cycle lines being made on the roads, which no one cycles. So how do we deal with that? The law-abiding drivers, how do we deal with that?
Don't buy a bike.
No, take Sadiq Khan to the back of the masjid and give him some ta'zeer. Yeah. So ta'zeer is a beautiful topic in that you are the ones in charge of these laws. You govern your affairs. You know your people better. You know your society better. So ta'zeer is there to govern. Anyone else? Any other questions? So that's another discussion about if this is referring to death and we prove this, can we not just inject them or electrocute them and other things? Why does it have to be stone? So traditionally speaking, that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said. Allah used the word rajam. And rajama means to throw. So traditionally speaking, no, it's going to be rajam. That's what, and as we said, one of the purposes to that, I know it's harsh, it's heavy, to absorb is heavy. One of the reasons that Allah, what did he say? وَلْيَشْهَدْ عَذَابَهُمَا طَائِفَةٌ مِنَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. So people witness that. So if the punishment is made subtle, like an injection or something, what are people going to witness? Where's the deterrent? You just put to sleep. But if, imagine, God forbid, and I had a friend who, well, actually not my, one of my teachers, he used to live in Saudi, and he said that as a kid he witnessed this happen in Saudi, stoning. And he said, Wallahi, from that day, the topic of zina never come in his head. He said the issue of cheating, I saw in my own eyes, because this doesn't even come in my head, because I saw it, I never forgot it as a child, and he's an old man now, he said, it's never left my head. He said, no way would I even go, even think about it, let alone go down that road. Is a deterrent. Anything else before we turn to? Okay.
Feeling a bit hungry.
Yeah, always hungry. Okay. Where are we? Let's lost the phone. Okay, so going to YouTube. Farhana, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. MashaAllah. Amir, MashaAllah, is sitting here and he's online as well. Not registered, you don't need to say yes, sir.
Just say yes.
He said, Assalamu alaikum to everybody. Auntie Azmat, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Everybody in the class, alhamdulillah, we are able to attend the class online. MashaAllah, Auntie Azmat, MashaAllah, she's always attending our class. Allah bless her. She sends salams to everybody. Bushra as well, Assalamu alaikum wa barakatuh. Eid Mubarak to everybody in the class. Brother Zubayr as well says, Eid Mubarak, Assalamu alaikum to everybody. Brother Zubayr, do the lashes have to be continuous and done all 100 at a go, or is there consideration for the welfare of the individual be at a punishment? So the question is, if somebody's got 100 lashes, do you do one at a time, or do you take 100 and lash in one go? What if the person is old, or what if the person is vulnerable? So obviously those things are taken into consideration. But if the lashing is going to cause the person to die or become ill, then it's not allowed, because then it would transgress, right?
Mention the
Right. Okay, yes. So yeah, that's correct. So the lashing, if the person through the lashing is going to get worse or die, then the lashing is not applied. Okay, it's not applied. So because then it would defeat the purpose of the punishment. It's not to kill; it's to just warn. Yama, assalamu alaikum wa barakatuh to everyone in the class. And Musha's lineage. Jazakallah khairan, very interesting topic, Zubayr. The stages which the Quran went through in making alcohol haram, would these be considered abrogation? That's another very good technical question. In that alcohol, is that an example of abrogation? Now, generally speaking, for common Muslim, you can say yes, but technically speaking, no. Because why? Because when it comes to the definition of nasakh is something that Allah made halal and then made haram or made changes to it. Allah never said alcohol was haram. So it doesn't technically fit the definition of, it was just a practice that people are doing. Allah never said alcohol is haram. He never said that, but people are doing it, right? So technically it doesn't fit the definition of nasakh, even though I know in books they use that as an example, but it says not. Okay, last question. Anisa says, what if someone is accused of zina and there are only 3 witnesses, but one of the witnesses is the person you committed zina with? No, the witness has to be independent, not the one who committed the zina. And if the person has 3 witnesses, then they should not raise the case of zina because they will get 80 lashes for qadh. Okay? 80 lashes for qadh. So it has to be 4 witnesses. All right. Last one, Facebook, and then I promise you, you can eat.
You can hear his stomach.
I'm looking at your eyebrows. Okay. All right, okay. Fair. There's no more questions. So, Jazakallah khair, all those watching on Facebook as well. I've lost some of your comments, but get those watching on Facebook. Inshallah, next week we'll continue with verse number 3. Barakallahu fikum. Inshallah, if you want to, how should we do this? Ladies first? Yeah, ladies first. So, ladies, if you want to go and get your food, inshallah, and then the men will follow. The justice of Islam. If you go first, we eat everything. Sorry? Okay. Okay, no problem.
Most of the on the front row, they are old people.